Welcome back to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. I'm your host, Sara Payne, and I'm bringing you fascinating conversations with some of the industry's top marketing minds. Today, we're unpacking a topic that's central to brand credibility, thought leadership, and long-term influence. But it feels especially urgent right now, the evolving role of earned media. We're in a moment where trust in media is eroding. AI is blurring the lines between fact and fabrication, and public skepticism is at an all-time high. A recent Fortune article interviewing New York Times CEO Meredith Kopit Levien summed it up perfectly. Trust in the media has become both more fragile and more consequential. So what does that mean for health brands? And what should CMOs be thinking about differently in 2025? I'm thrilled to be joined by Linda Zebian, Vice President of Communications at Muck Rack. Linda leads messaging, issues management, and media strategy for the company, but she also brings a unique perspective from her decade at the New York Times, where she helped shape communications for its growth, product, and tech teams. She's seen firsthand how earned media can drive not just visibility, but real business results. Today, we'll explore how the media landscape is shifting, what journalists need now from brands more than ever, and what's at stake for those who underinvest in earned visibility. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thanks so much for having me, Sara. I'm really excited for our chat today.
Yeah, thrilled to have you here. Let's start with, how would you describe the state of earned media right now?
Complex. I think it's really interesting that you quoted my former colleague, Meredith Levien. I'm going to have to share this podcast with her once it's out.
Did you see that Fortune article that just came out on her? It was a fascinating read.
I did see it. She's a fascinating human. We worked actually very closely together when I was at the Times. And I believe wholeheartedly still in the mission of that organization. It was the honor of my life to do comms for an organization like that. The state of journalism, every year goes by, and every year I feel like we're saying this is the most complicated year for media, for earned media, for PR, for comms. And it never ceases to amaze me that it becomes more and more complex. And I feel like folks are constantly saying, like, it's the worst year, or it's never been so bad. And I think folks are still saying that in 2025, but I also see, from my perspective, lots of glimmer of hope.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people see AI and technology as a threat, but I actually see it as a gigantic opportunity. And I haven't seen promise for earned and traditional journalism in my career as promising, I guess, as I have. And that's for one significant reason. And that is the power of GEO in the sense that LLMs are sourcing credible news organizations much more than they're sourcing, let's say, content creators and social media sources, right? If you go on an LLM and you're saying, tell me what the best lawnmower is to buy, they're going to credible news organizations for that information.
Yes.
And they're going to surface credible, reported content to supply you with that information, right? They're not going to, content creator XYZ to get their opinion,
100%.
but really vetted, reported news. So what does that mean? How does that in turn help journalism? And then how does that in turn boost PR and comms professionals, right? It's an ecosystem that actually will flourish if the AI, if the folks, powering the tech, pay for that content. You can see like tons of lawsuits that are alive and well, right? So we need to pay pay the traditional media outlets for the content that's being used, and B, that to me is an empowerment of our profession, and almost a rebirth of the power of earned. So I've been waiting for the rebirth of the power of earned for a heck of a long time, right? how many journalists, how many PR pros are there to journalists? The ratio's just been going up and up and up. Journalists are like, their wages have been stagnant for God knows how many years. Like, we can get into it, but that's a doozy of an answer for an opening question. But I can't wait to get into it with you. But that's how I feel. I feel like we're at a moment of opportunity for journalism
Yeah,
and
I
PR
love
right
that.
now. Yeah.
I love that framing. I love the optimism around that, and I believe in that. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the power of earned. Went to journalism school myself. Chose the PR path much like you did, and I believe in it too. And despite these challenges that we've been facing, how it transpires from my perspective is brands continue to double down on the investment in earned. Even despite some of the evolving dynamics and some of the pressures that, which is a byproduct of some of the pressures that journalists face, which you just began to get into there. Let's actually go there. You have access, you see trends through the Muck Rack lens that most marketing leaders don't have access to. What are some of the pressures that journalists are facing today that marketing leaders should make sure that they understand?
Well, I mean, we survey journalists every year. We have a report that comes out that just came out. Called our State of Work Life Balance in Journalism here at Muck Rack. And for the folks who don't know Muck Rack, we are a PR software platform used by 6,000 brands and agencies, PR brands. I'm sorry. Um, if you don't know Muck Rack, we are a PR and comms software platform, and we're used by 6,000 brands and agencies all over the world. And we originated it as a free journalist tool. We still provide journalists with free tools, including portfolios and trends tools and data tools, etc. We've committed to journalists to provide free tools for them forever. So we service both journalists and PR pros, but we do survey them every year to find out like what's it like to be a journalist in 2025. And so in our work-life balance report this year, we found significant stress and burnout. So half of
Mm,
journalists we found considered quitting due to burnout in the last year. Half.
wow,
That's a high number.
very high.
Right? We know like it's stressful to be a journalist. We know kind of, the news is crazy. It's a crazy world we live in, but that seems really, really crazy. And that many journalists, 42%, have actually previously quit a job because of burnout.
Mm,
So we know as PR people and probably marketers too, we all work in quick moving, high stress environments. Journalists are right there with us, right? But you know what? Despite that, more than half say they plan to stay in journalism, which I think is a good sign. We need journalists and journalism in a free society, right?
absolutely.
It's part of it's part of the Constitution here in the United States. We know that. So, free democracy needs free society. A free society needs journalism. So, we actually thought too when we put the survey out, maybe it's associated with like the 2024 election cycle, but it really wasn't. We found we surveyed journalists, it really wasn't. Stress remained high even after the election cycle.
Mm,
So yeah, and mental health just kind of declining mental health kind of stayed high. So that's really what we found. And in terms of sources of stress, workload, kind of having to be always on, and salary were
yeah.
the top sources. We found that, journalists are earning pretty much regardless of how long they've been a journalist, um, around 70K on average per year, which to me, when you're thinking about a lot of these journalists probably live in metropolitan areas where there's high
Right.
density of people, is bananas.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
pretty low.
bananas. Yeah.
So when we think about these pressures and the burnout, I mean, I love this statement that many of them are still committed to staying in the industry, right? I mean, that's what allows us to hold on to that optimism, right? But how can we, as brands, serve them better to help in this reality that they face of high stress? What's your take on what brands can do better in interacting with journalists and making sure that they are not wasting their time in providing value?
Absolutely. So I think what a lot of folks need to know about pitching and talking to journalists is, and then at Muck Rack, we use technology to put safeguards in place for this. Of course, there are best practices for pitching the media, right? But also you can use technology to put checks and balances in place, right? Mass pitching, never a good idea. Unless you are a giant brand and everybody's waiting for you to make a statement on something, never mass pitch. Period. It's unacceptable. Don't do it. Just don't. Um, so targeted one on we've done research on this, by the way. So the proof is in the pudding, it's in the data. Here's what the perfect pitch should look like. If you are, let's say, a marketer, if you're working at a small healthcare company, maybe you don't have a full-time agency, maybe you're just trying to pitch on your own, maybe you're in a startup environment, whatever. Okay? If you're trying to pitch a journalist, email is preferred always. Don't call them usually. Okay. So email, one-on-one email, less than 200 words in your pitch. Pitch them earlier in the day. Think about deadlines. We're on deadline. Journalists are on
Yes.
deadline still. So I would do it before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, wherever time zone you're in, and keep it under 200 words. Bullets are your friend. Use a bullet. Okay. And earlier in the week is better because the closer you get to Friday, the less they care. Um, think like a journalist, if at all possible, when you're writing a pitch. So, and it's not what matters to you in your pitch. Nobody cares that you have a milestone coming up at your hospital or at your pharma company. Nobody cares that you're
Yes.
celebrating a moment. Good for you. Happy for you. But that's not a news item. Okay. And it doesn't matter what the journalist even thinks. It's actually what matters to the journalist's audience, what they think, what matters to the people that are reading that journalist's content. So it's really not personal to the journalist at all. And it's not personal to you. And it's not personal to your CEO either, right? It's to that reader, to those eyeballs or those eardrums, right? So think about it from the perspective. So the first thing you need to do is to read or listen to what they're creating and then write a pitch based on that. And that's essential to a pitch. One follow-up is okay, 1 to 3 days after you pitch. More than that, just stop. You're going to turn them off. And also, PR is about relationships. So if you really want to get in touch and build a relationship with a journalist, try to reach out to them about something that's not a pitch, something that when you're not trying to get something out of them. So say, hey, I heard you speak on that panel, or hey, I read your piece about the breakthrough in research from XYZ organization. I thought this line was brilliant. Or, hey, I saw your video on your social media about whatever, right? Try to build a relationship with them that's genuine. They're much better to respond to you, or at least tell you what's wrong with your pitch and why they're not engaging with you if they understand who you are. Engage with them on social, send them a note, whatever it is. Also, it's not always about getting into the biggest, most widely circulated, widely listened to, widely read outlet,
Yes.
right? Sometimes it's about building relationships with these niche and trade publications because that's the audience that matters most to you. So it's strategic comms is really complicated, as most marketers probably understand at this point. But you really need to have a full understanding of your earned strategy. It's not just kind of like throwing things at the wall and sticking and seeing if they stick. If that makes sense, we could talk forever.
Yeah, for sure. Such great advice there that you offered, Linda. I was curious, going back to your earlier reference to your recent report, state of the workforce, or forget exactly how you
Work-life
titled
balance,
that.
yeah.
Thank you,
Work-life
work-life
balance,
balance.
yeah.
Did you survey both sort of more mainstream journalists as well as some of these more niche trade publications? How did that audience breakdown look in that survey?
So we don't have a breakdown of exactly, who they were. It was 432 journalists beginning of this year. Most of them are in the United States, some in the UK, India, and Canada, but, um, they were, at all freelancers, full-time journalists,
Got
any
it. Yeah,
podcasters. Yeah, we didn't break it down by that, but
all of the above.
yeah.
Great. In your time leading external comms at the New York Times, one thing I really find fascinating about that is that you had this unique challenge of pitching stories about the Times to reporters at the Times, right? Like there wasn't some back door that you get to sneak through because you were inside the organization. Like you equally had to pitch those news stories to be worthy of coverage in the New York Times. And, I know you just offered a bunch of advice around how to be valuable to journalists, but anything else that experience taught you about the art of breaking through?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was almost even harder. They almost had a higher bar to cover themselves. Of course, you're going to pitch the media desk, right? Within the business desk at the New York Times, we had to talk to the media desk and then the reporter that covered, primarily news publishing. Um, I think that the tip there was that you had to build a relationship with that journalist who was covering you. And B, you had to give them exclusives, primarily at the New York Times specifically. They want exclusives, right? The New York Times, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal. They want exclusive. They want access. They want numbers. They want things you're probably not willing to give them. And also, it's their job to ask, right? So just because the
Yes.
reporter asks for something doesn't mean that they are bad, wrong, mean, evil. It is their job to ask, and it is your job as the PR person to filter and to decline and to negotiate and to say, well, we're not going to give you that, but what I can give you is this. And it's your job to create a story, to protect the brand that you are representing, but also to share enough information that you can tell the story to make it interesting and engaging and also be transparent, right? Especially if
Yes.
all earned is not positive. You could also be trying to massage a narrative that is surrounding your brand, particularly in healthcare, right? Sometimes we
Yes.
don't want a story to come out, or there's a story that's coming out, or a series of stories, or a narrative that's happening that we don't particularly love, right? But we can steer it in certain ways by using earned strategically to to steer it in a direction that we like a little bit better or that works a little better for us. And so I think that's actually more important than placing positive stories in this environment because real journalists probably aren't going to help you tell your positive story all that much. That's what owned is for, right? That's what social is for, right? Earned is really about understanding what people are saying about you and massaging it into something a little bit more favorable toward your brand. And so that's the really tricky part about earned. And you may have an agency who can work on all of your positive, fluffy, good news. But if you're an in house marketer, if you're an in house PR person, it's really more that ongoing working on steering the conversation in ways that you want, an overall perception and tone um, that you get with earned. And so I think that those ongoing conversations and those conversations that don't actually end up in print are some of the most important work you'll do as a PR and comms professional.
Yeah, I love that perspective and the advice around steering the conversation, really focusing your efforts there, which I think is particularly relevant for larger organizations, larger brands that are well known, that are going to have, maybe more risk or chance of these, potentially negative narratives coming through. Not always, but smaller startup organizations are just going to be lesser known. So they're simply not maybe fully on the radar yet. And I think one of the strategies that works really well there is thinking, to your earlier point, less about the milestone or the story that you want to tell, but rather thinking about what the audience and the journalist needs, right? Which is meaningful, unique contributions to topics that everyone is talking about, like bringing something new to the conversation rather than the same old perspective, on the future of healthcare, like bringing something truly bold, unique, and having, to your point, the data to back that up, which isn't, again, hey, look how great we are. It's more, hey, there's this important conversation over here we should be having as an industry. And I think, your readers care about, but doing that from a truly unique data-backed perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. We also do a state of journalism, which is a survey actually coming out. So this is state of work-life balance, which is really kind of gets into sort of the minds and hearts of journalists. But we have a survey coming out at the beginning of June called State of Journalism, which is more looking at the practice of journalism and how PR folks and journalists work together, like more in the practical day to day. And we have a question in there every year about like sources and the validity or the accountability and value of certain kinds of sources. And CEOs tend to rank pretty low. You've got kind of
Yeah.
academics in there, researchers like that rank pretty high for in terms of value,
Yes.
just because they're neutral, right? CEOs obviously are kind of more viewed as bias or having an agenda to drive. If you're in healthcare, particularly for profit healthcare, you've got and you want to it's newsjacking, right? That's what we're talking about here. Like
Yes.
inserting yourself into a conversation that's trending or already happening on social or in the news, whatever. So I would say the tip there is not be like, oh, hey, there's a diabetes conversation going around or some new data out, and my CEO can talk about that. Pitch sent. Lame. Nobody's going to call you, right? I'm sorry. Nobody's going to call
Right.
you. What's
Yeah.
your CEO? Why? Why am I going to call your CEO? No, no one's going to call them. So, why is your CEO relevant? What do they have to say? Send the quote directly. Get the quote from your CEO, write it for them, probably. Let's be real. You're going to write it for them.
Yeah. Right.
Get it approved. Why is it unique? Why is it different? Where's the data point? Where's the newsy item? Where's the provocative thing? What did they say that's going to make a headline? Okay, so and so hospital system, so and so healthcare, so and so tech company, AI tech company has this, and they said this, and it's a little bit snazzy, and I can see it on a Chiron on a screen, and oh my gosh, we're going to get 3 more calls from 3 more journalists who want to talk to that CEO. And if you don't think that that's going to happen, then you probably shouldn't send that pitch today.
Yeah. Good point.
I always tell the folks who work for me, if you don't feel more than 60 to 70% sure that your pitch is going to land, don't send it.
Don't
And
send it.
any agency that tells you that they're sending pitches X amount of times a week or whatever, or they're counting pitches or using pitches as a KPI, run. Because pitches don't matter. You should never send the pitch unless you're confident that it's going to land. And frankly, we don't do that much pitching in my team because there's not all that much news to share. And that's
Right.
another way.
You're pitching when you know you have a great story, which means your hit rate is your success rate is much higher.
Exactly. And so that's another way that you can build credibility with journalists. Every time you send a crappy pitch, your credibility goes way down. And I will
Absolutely.
say, back to your New York Times question, the reason that the New York Times has such a well-respected comms team is because they respond like quick, right? And they know that like if broadcaster or producer is looking for a guest, that the New York Times comms team will respond almost immediately. And they're super responsive, even if they don't have someone to offer, a spokesperson to offer. But also, like they know exactly how media works. They know exactly how the interview process will go. They know how the fact check will go. And they're professionals. And they also don't pitch junk. right? So you have
Right.
your own reputation. Even if you leave your current company as a PR person, you go to someone else, that journalist's you're probably gonna stay in the same industry. The journalist's gonna remember who you are. They know who you are. They're gonna be like, oh, they may not even open your email. This person pitches junk. You don't want to be that person,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is such a great context for client side leaders to have as well, because I think sometimes that, the agencies out there that are maybe focused on, pitch counts or whatever, it's because of pressure on the client side,
Yeah.
right? Of what have you done for me lately, or, where are we at? And I think, continually education and reinforcing these things, and it's not about the volume of pitches that go out the door. Increasing number of pitches that we send out the door does not increase your chances of getting a hit. It doesn't. It is the quality of the pitch to the right reporter in the right moment that is going to increase your chance. That is the art of media relations.
Yeah. It's storytelling. And it's nailing it because journalists are storytellers and it is a partnership. But if whether journalists want to admit it or not, and
Right,
maybe
right.
I mean maybe I mean listen, I'm not saying that journalists get their best ideas from PR people. Absolutely not. But my dog's trying to get in. But when push comes to shove, like a lot of times journalists need us too. We are the
Yeah. Oh,
gatekeepers in
yes.
a lot of cases, right? It is a give and take. And so we're all storytellers. We're all trying to get the best results. And but like, if we don't want to be seen as in PR as flax or as, whatever, I hate that word. I
Same.
think it's getting better. I really do think it's getting better. But to your point, it's not, it's not the agencies that are really pushing it. Like the agencies I think get a bad rep a lot for like what do they call them? Pitch houses. I heard this term a while back, and I never heard that term before. Like there are certain agencies that are known as pitch houses, and it's actually really sad because it's like, well, is that really? I mean, agencies are the best of the best. Like these folks know
Right.
what they're doing. They know fast pitching is not right, but it's because the clients are like, well, I'm paying you X, Y, Z. I need to see concrete results. But like, what about all that stuff, all that relationship building in the background, and all the other stuff that we're doing? Then I wonder, like, I don't know the intricacies of these relationships, but still, it's just like we all have to lower the expectation and understand all of the work and building relationships outside of number of pitches sent, which is like metrics is a whole nother conversation. But yeah, yeah,
Whole other conversation
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
What do you see as sort of the role of earned media moving forward for brands? CMOs are listening and thinking, gosh, there's some challenges there, but what should we do with our investment in earned media? What's your perspective on that, Linda?
yeah. And I think this goes back to where we started. It's that GEO, like the generative engine optimization replacing SEO. So I think if you're a brand and you're thinking about SEO, I'm not saying SEO is dead, but
Right.
GEO has to be considered. And if you care about SEO, then you got to care about GEO. And if you
Yes.
care about GEO, you got to care about earned. On the flip side of that, or on the other side of that coin, is reputation. And reputation, like every time I think that reputation is not going to maybe matter as much, it kind of just does, right? And I think it's just the general I swear, I think, like, like, sometimes with the politics, like, oh, the DEI conversation is shifting and people are moving away from DEI and you can't say DEI but then, you can't ignore the fact that, like, the consumers that are, the millennials are still here,
Yes.
the Gen Zs are coming, and they care. They put their dollars into brands that they believe in.
Absolutely.
So when that is just the dang truth, whatever side of the aisle you sit on politically, and you want to make money, you have to care about your reputation. And that is
100%.
for whatever, because we live in a polarized world. So whatever color, whatever you want, whatever audience, whatever person whoever your customer is, you have to speak to them in their language if you want them to buy from you. So whatever,
Absolutely.
and that will drive your reputation. So you could think about it on both sides of the aisle. So your reputation matters and your brand means something. Your brand just can't be, you know, grass anymore. It has to be red grass or blue grass. And that's just the way it is. So like, and that's all comms. And that's all comes through earned. And comms isn't just earned. It's not just that. It's all the messaging and all of the mission and all of the representation and everything you say and everything you position and everything, it's all intertwined. And that is your comms team, and that is all comes through earned.
Yes.
And earned in social and internal comms, and what you're saying to your employees, and what your employees are saying about you on Glassdoor. It all is the same, and it's all run by the same folks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, there are risks to not showing up in the conversation, right? Like that is really not an option, right? To just simply not participate, because there are impacts if you are not a part of the conversation. And I agree with what you're saying on stand up for something, but be consistent with that. Don't
Yeah.
It can't be flavor of the day, DEI cool today, not cool tomorrow, right? Like if that is part of your central to your mission and existence as an organization, and you have been investing in that, hiring against that, like it has become a core principle of decisions you make in your business, then leverage that, right?
Right.
And be consistent with it, because to your point, there is a segment of the population that cares about that very deeply. And I think we're seeing play out in real time right now, people changing their buying behaviors based on what they've seen from companies that maybe historically invested in DEI, and they're seeing a shift in that happen right now, because now we're
Exactly.
wondering, where do you stand on this? All those years of you
Exactly.
telling me you did care about that, what changed? What
Exactly. And if you
changed?
didn't make a stand before, that's cool. But
Right.
don't, like, you just can't just,
Maybe it's not your
shift
thing.
shift with the wind because
Correct.
you had somebody who's loyal to you for maybe that particular reason. It's just, I think that the lesson in all of it is be genuine and stick to your genuine core values. And core values are a real thing. And I think transparency and authenticity is coming up more and more. And I think the younger generations can see that, and they want to see that from the brands that they buy from. They want to see that from the companies they're working for, and that's okay. Authenticity is a real. They want to see that from the government officials they vote for. It's not so much, whatever they're not voting. They're voting on issues like almost of the heart now,
Right.
rather than more policy. So, like, whether you might be working in like, health policy or something. Like, we have to remember these things, and we have to start. We're comms people. We have to address, and marketers, we address the personas and the audiences. So keep that in mind. And back to your question about earned and how it fits. I think now more than ever, earned and paid and revenue marketing and the owned and social, they all are gonna be working together even more than before. But
100%.
I'm frankly just happy for us earned folks that, we're part of the core now, and we're not kind of the afterthought, perhaps. We're not being brought in to clean up the mess. That's kind of why I joined Muck Rack. I left the Times to come to this company because I believed in it and I wanted to help folks like me have a bigger piece of the pie and a bigger voice and have the tech that we deserve to have. So
Yes.
to be a part of building the technology and the tools for folks like me has just been another honor. After leaving the Times, another honor. And I feel, honored to be a part of it all, but like, you know, it's really good. It's really good. We can all work together. There's room for all of us. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
love the progress that we have made, and thank you for continuing to be a part of that. And I think this is a good place to segue into a few quick fire questions here before we
Yeah.
wrap. And the first one is we tell our clients that showing up consistently in earned media isn't just about visibility, but it's about building trust. What's one signal that tells you a brand is earning that trust in the right way?
People take pictures of themselves like with your brand and they share it on their Instagram stories.
Mm, love that. We believe great spokespeople aren't just media trained, they're mission aligned. What's one trait that makes a spokesperson truly stand out when representing a brand in earned media?
Well, they provide a customer example.
I love that. That's great. Fill in the blank on this one. The future of earned media will belong to brands that blank.
Are authentic.
Love it. Okay, last one. What's one PR or media buzzword you wish we could just ban forever?
Evolving media landscape.
I think I did use that earlier on
I use it too,
in this
but I hate it.
episode.
I hate it.
We'll scratch it all. We'll
Okay.
scratch it all. Linda, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, for being candid with us, giving us that behind the scenes perspective on how brands can show up more effectively in today's media environment. How can our listeners get in touch with you or get their hands on these valuable reports coming out of Muck Rack?
They can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. Please give me a follow and let's have conversations. And they can download all of Muck Rack's research and data for free at muckrack.com.
Wonderful. Thanks again. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. It was so much fun.
For all the CMOs and health marketing leaders listening out there, earned media is not just about press hits. It's about trust, timing, and showing up when it matters most. If you're looking to sharpen your earned media strategy or just better understand how journalists work today, be sure to check out that latest research that Linda was talking about. We'll definitely be sure to link to it in our show notes. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence, because the future of healthcare depends on it. We'll see you next time.